My dad said periods were disgusting, and then my little brother absolutely destroyed him. My dad has always been one of those macho guys. The kind of guy who thinks every problem can be solved by toughening up. The kind of guy who believes showing emotions is weakness, therapy is nonsense, and anything remotely associated with women automatically falls into the category of things men shouldn't talk about. Growing up with him was exhausting. It wasn't that he was constantly screaming or throwing things. In some ways, that almost would have been easier to understand. Instead, he had this talent for making people feel small with just a few words, especially me. I was his daughter, and from as early as I can remember, it felt like he had already decided who I was before I even had the chance to become my own person. When I wanted to play soccer, he rolled his eyes and said it wasn't a real sport unless people were getting tackled. When I got interested in science, he joked that I'd probably change my mind once I discovered makeup. When I talked about going to college, he'd say things like, "Just don't spend all that money to end up being somebody's wife." He always said it with a laugh, but somehow the jokes never felt like jokes. Meanwhile, my little brother Finn could do absolutely no wrong. To be fair, none of that was Finn's fault. Dad had wanted a son his entire life. By the time Finn was born, it was like Christmas had arrived permanently. Everything Finn did was fascinating. Everything Finn said was brilliant. Everything Finn wanted was important. I used to resent that when I was younger. Then Finn got older, and I realized something surprising. He hated it, not openly, not dramatically, but he hated the way Dad treated us differently. Whenever Dad would dismiss me, Finn would look uncomfortable. Whenever Dad made one of his comments about women, Finn would usually find an excuse to leave the room. As he got older, the gap between them only became more obvious. Dad expected a miniature version of himself. Instead, Finn turned into one of the kindest people I've ever met. The realization really hit me last year when I broke my leg. And not just a simple fracture, I fractured my femur. For anyone who doesn't know, your femur is the largest bone in your body. Breaking it hurts in ways that should honestly be illegal. I was playing soccer with friends when it happened. 1 second I was sprinting. The next second I heard a sound I'll never forget. Then came the pain. I remember lying on the field staring at the sky while everyone around me panicked. The ambulance ride was a blur. The surgery was worse. Recovery was somehow even worse than that. For weeks I could barely move without feeling like someone was driving a nail through my leg. One afternoon after I got home from the hospital, Dad came by to check on me. At least that's what he claimed he was doing. I started explaining what had happened during the accident. I wasn't complaining. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I was literally just answering his question. I got maybe halfway through describing the injury when he interrupted me. I don't want to hear about your girl stuff. I actually thought he was joking. Then I realized he wasn't. I stared at him. Dad, what? I fractured my femur, he shrugged. Still sounds like girl stuff. Even now, I don't understand what that was supposed to mean. A broken leg isn't exactly gender specific, but arguing with him was pointless. Trying to have a rational discussion with my father was like trying to teach algebra to a brick wall. Eventually, you just stop trying. The funny thing is that while Dad barely visited during recovery, Finn practically lived at my apartment. He'd come over after school almost every day. Sometimes he'd help with groceries, sometimes he'd help clean. Most of the time we'd just sit around playing video games. It became our thing. Since I couldn't really go anywhere, we'd spend hours in the living room playing Fortnite, arguing about strategy and making fun of each other whenever one of us got eliminated. Honestly, those afternoons probably kept me sane. Recovery is incredibly boring. People always talk about the pain. Nobody talks about the boredom. Days start blending together. The walls start feeling smaller. You run out of things to watch. You run out of things to do. Having Finn around made the whole process a lot easier. Then last week something happened that I don't think I'll ever forget. It started like any normal afternoon. We were sitting in the living room playing Fortnite. I was still recovering enough that running around wasn't exactly an option, so gaming had become our default activity. Finn was focused on the screen when he suddenly paused. Hey, I glanced over. What? Can I ask you something kind of weird? That immediately got my attention. Finn wasn't usually shy about asking questions. Sure, he hesitated for a second, then he said, "What's having a period actually like?" I blinked. That wasn't the question I was expecting. Seeing my expression, he immediately rushed to explain. "One of my best friends got hers recently." He scratched the back of his neck. I realized I don't actually know anything about it. Then he added, "And I don't want to accidentally make her uncomfortable." The moment he said that, I felt myself smiling. Not because the question was funny, because of why he was asking it. Most teenage boys would have avoided the topic entirely. Finn was actively trying to understand something because he wanted to be supportive. That alone made me proud, so I paused the game, set my controller down, and started explaining. Well, first of all, everybody experiences it differently. He nodded immediately, actually paying attention, which already put him ahead of half the adult men I've met. Some people get cramps, some don't, some get headaches, some get exhausted, some get emotional, some barely notice anything. He looked genuinely interested. That sounds awful. It can be. Then I laughed. Honestly, it's kind of like your body does a monthly reset while punishing you for surviving another month without a baby. That got a laugh out of him. I continued explaining. Nothing graphic, nothing awkward, just basic information. The sort of stuff people should probably learn anyway. Every few minutes he'd ask another question. Not because he was being weird, because he genuinely wanted to understand. The entire conversation was actually really sweet. Then I reached what is probably the most important piece of medical knowledge humanity has ever discovered. Oh, and chocolate helps. Finn laughed. Seriously, absolutely. Why? I have no idea. That's not an answer. It's the only answer we've got. We were both laughing when Dad's voice suddenly came from the other room. Hey, the tone alone made my stomach sink. Then came the rest. Shut up, nobody wants to hear about something that disgusting. The laughter instantly disappeared. I stared toward the hallway. For a second I thought maybe I'd misheard him. Then he doubled down. A man doesn't need to know about women's stuff. My jaw literally dropped, even for him. That was impressive. I could feel years of frustration building all at once. Every stupid comment, every dismissive remark. Every time he treated women like they existed on some separate planet, I was about to absolutely unload on him. But before I could say a single word, Finn spoke first. He slowly turned his head, looked directly toward the hallway, and said, "No wonder Mom left you." Silence, complete silence. The kind of silence that feels physical. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed, nobody spoke. I don't think I'd ever seen someone get hit with a more devastating sentence in my entire life. The craziest part was how calm Finn sounded. There wasn't any anger, no yelling, no dramatic speech. Just a simple observation, a statement of fact. And somehow that made it 10 times worse. Dad froze. For the first time in human history, he apparently had no response. No comeback, no lecture, no argument, nothing. He just stood there, processing. Then he turned around, walked back into the other room, and disappeared. Like a defeated NPC whose dialogue options had run out. The second he was gone, I completely lost it. I started laughing so hard my leg hurt, which, considering the state of my femur, was genuinely dangerous. Tears were running down my face. I couldn't breathe. I had to grab a pillow just to stop myself from falling off the couch. Finn looked confused. What? That somehow made it even funnier. You just destroyed him. I didn't do anything, Finn. What? You emotionally executed that man. He rolled his eyes. I just told the truth. Which made me laugh even harder. Eventually, we both calmed down. Then, as if nothing had happened, Finn turned back to me and asked, "So ... chocolate, right?" I stared at him, still trying not to laugh. "Yes, just chocolate. No." I thought about it for a second. Then I said, "Honestly? Make her a little care package." "A care package? Yeah." He looked interested. What goes in it? Her favorite candy. Maybe chocolate, some snacks, a drink she likes. Soft socks if you really want bonus points. He immediately opened the notes app on his phone. I wasn't even surprised. The kid takes everything seriously. I kept going. The important thing is letting her know you care. He nodded. Got it. But don't make it weird. What does that mean? It means don't suddenly start treating her like she's fragile. Oh, just be supportive. He smiled. Okay. A few days later, he came back carrying a small gift bag. The second I saw it, I knew. You actually did it. He grinned. Inside were candy bars, hot chocolate packets, fuzzy socks, and a handwritten note. I laughed. How did she react? His smile got bigger. She cried. My heart melted. Good crying, good crying. Apparently nobody had ever done something like that for her before. And somehow that didn't surprise me, because kindness like that is rare. Especially from teenage boys who are usually terrified of being perceived as caring too much. After he left that night, I found myself thinking about something. Physically, Finn looks exactly like Dad. Same eyes, same hair, same smile. Sometimes it's actually creepy how similar they are. But that's where the similarities end. Dad thinks empathy is weakness. Finn thinks empathy is basic human decency. Dad refuses to learn about things that don't directly affect him. Finn actively seeks out knowledge so he can understand other people better. Dad spent years trying to teach Finn how to be a man. And somehow Finn learned how to be a good person instead. Honestly, I think that's why Mom leaving ended up being the best thing that ever happened to him. Because growing up, I was always terrified he'd turn into Dad. Now I know he won't. And every time I think about him sitting there calmly destroying our father's entire worldview with a single sentence, I can't help smiling. My brother may look exactly like our dad, but he is absolutely nothing like him. And for the first time in a very long time, that gives me a lot of hope.